Okay, so thank you for everybody who watched that last video, and apologies for the sound quality. I kind of just over edited it a bit, filtered it a bit too hard. Didn't think it was much of a problem, but for a lot of you it was, so I do apologize and thank you for sticking with me on that. I did order a mic, which you can't see here. I'll just give a quick bat too, so you should be able to hear that. Look, I have lots of microphones. A few people commented that given the hobby that I have, that it's unusual that I have such poor sound quality. I've got loads of mics, drum kits, audio mics, broadcast mics, lav mics, everything. Didn't have anything that worked with this particular setup that I have for video recording. So I ended up buying something. So that should make that a little easier. If I'm doing, when I use the big camera, and I can use the broadcast mic there, that's a little easier, but getting it set up in the way that my room is oriented at the minute, it's a little difficult. So I haven't done that yet, probably will at some point in the future, just, the aesthetic of it looks good. So yes, anyway, right, so down to business. What I want to talk about today is it's time to build a new. Okay, what do I mean by that? The old is dying. The old culture, the old thought system, everything is just, it's dropping away, right? We now have an opportunity to build a new. So, let me contrast the United Kingdom, and this is mainly for the guys in the United Kingdom, not really talking to the Americans so much here. In America, you've always had Nashville, okay? I'm going to speak from the point of view of music, being a musician. You've always had Nashville. Nashville kind of being 80% Christian, had an influence on the whole region. In England, we talk about Nashville, we mean the whole country scene. In America, I know you've got like Texas country. Austin's different to Texas, and Austin's different to Nashville. They all have their own different flavors of country. I get it. I've been into country music for a while. I've produced country music. I understand that there are differences. Even Canadian country is different to American country, etc., etc. But they've had this cultural vanguard that's kind of always been there. They've had somewhere they could always vent their traditional values. We don't have that in the United Kingdom. You could argue maybe Northumbrian folk or Morris dances or something, but that's about as far as it goes in England. Everything in England was completely consumed by the liberal cancer, the Marxist cancer, in the 60s, during the swinging 60s, the cultural revolution that took place in England, the soft revolution, right? So there's very little of that left. And what I'd spent a long time doing as a musician, given like my surname, David English, okay, it is an ancient surname. It goes back like 1500 years or so. We can trace the iterations back to. It literally just means angle, it comes from the Angles of Berwick, the huge horde that landed here. And I used to sit and think, well, what is English music? What is that? What is the essence of English music? Because it's kind of gone, right? We have a very Americanized version of things. And there are some cultural highlights within the last sort of 60 years of music that I think are particularly English. And I may do a little mini series on some highlights of English music going back all the way to the medieval times. I think are worth people checking out on if they're interested in this sort of thing. But I very deeply went on this journey of, well, what is English music? Really sort of started to look at the Galliards and the works of Byrd, Tallis, Purcell, and you can just keep going backwards into your playing songs and all the rest of it. And it was something I greatly enjoyed and I got a lot from. And there is a certain character to English music as well. But we don't have that outlet that they had in America with the country music scene. And we need to start creating our own scenes of things that are uniquely English, that are uniquely ours, that uniquely speak our values, that uniquely allow us to express our joy and have our fun, right? Ultimately, we need to be able to celebrate ourselves and celebrate our cultural authority. It doesn't all have to turn out like Elgar, right? Or Holst, or any of those other great towers and titans of the sort of late 18th and early 19th centuries. But we should have our own outlet, and we don't. And I think one of the things that kind of encourage people is, look, if you're on film, if you're on short film, vignettes, animation, poetry, short stories, music, whether it's rock music, heavy metal, deathcore, folk, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Let's just start building the new. Let's just start creating the things that have our message to them and sort of backing each other and supporting each other a little bit. Now, the biggest difference is that there isn't the financial net that something like Nashville affords the American culture that they have there. And they also had right-wingers within Hollywood that were able to make great right-wing films. They're pretty much independent. Tom Cruise did some pretty good things that were very traditional, even though I know he's a Scientologist. He is flying the flag for the old way of doing things a little bit. We don't have that, and that's a fact, and it's a shame. But it doesn't mean that we can't start building our new, and again, exerting our cultural authority. We have a great cultural authority. Even if you're in fashion, let's just start bringing some of this stuff back, like on a broad scale. Okay, let's just start getting into the tweeds and the caps. Is there any modern twists that someone could afford it? Let's just be visible. Okay, on a purely fashion level, let's be visible, and then let's start being heard on a cultural level. You see this with we didn't see it in Russia, but we're seeing it in China. Like the Chinese Communist Party almost completely destroyed Chinese culture, traditional Chinese culture. What we have is like a pastiche that they passed together, that they pasted together when they realized that they could make a bit of cash, right, off tourists in the 70s, but they destroyed the culture. But there's a renaissance happening in the Chinese culture. It's a lot of expats sort of fled China due to persecution and set up an artistic hub in New York, and they're sort of regenerating the traditional Chinese culture. Now, we don't have the scale to kind of do that. They took some of the biggest artistic heads in China to do that. We don't have that scale or scope here, but we do need to start digging into our roots and bringing them back a little bit, and celebrating what is uniquely ours. And I'm speaking to myself here a lot. I've been a musician since I was 14. God, that's a long time, like 34 years this year. I became a musician after a conversation with Lane Staley from Alice in Chains. But that's another story for another day. And I'm sitting on a huge amount of songs. I don't know whether any of them were very good. But look, I've almost landed a couple of, we had at least one record contract waved under our nose at some point, and we were lined up for potential management interest and just blew it. So, it's not without merit that I'm not the greatest songwriter in the world, but, I can, if you're a sort of burgeoning artist, I can probably point you in the right direction, right? And I know I need a band. I know by the end of this year, I need to be out with a band again, even if I can just entertain 30, 40 people in a room. Then that's me happy. I don't want stardom. I don't want notoriety. I don't want stardom and fame, that's for sure. But if I could just get out and do my thing, and that would be great. And look, the simple reason is culture is the soft form, right? We have a huge amount of political dissection going on of what is going on, and we know what's wrong. We know what the problem is. All right, we've dissected it to death. We know what it is. And we need to continue dissecting it, because that is stabbing the beast, right? But we need to start building the new. Culture is the soft power in terms of politics versus culture. Politics is quite hard power. There's only an X amount of people are going to get into the political discourse. But the cultural discourse is broad, and that's where we need to kind of settle ourselves. We need to start building this now. Do photo shoots that look great, and women in riding boots and jodhpurs and blokes with shotguns and stuff. Come on, man. It's like, we've got this all day. This is deep in us, this sort of thing. Let's celebrate what we have, music, write songs. Your songs don't have to be, England, my England, but they can be about your experience during the lockdown. They can be your experience of discovering your cultural identity. They can be about the one-to-one exchange, the brotherhood, the kinship, right? When Anglos meet. I mean, I went out with my wife yesterday, and we sat in a restaurant, and the girl who come and spoke to us she looks Italian, but she had a South African accent. And she was a South African girl whose mother was Italian descent. That's why. But we talked, and after we sort of mocked each other, one for being English, the other for being a Boer. And that was it. It was just locked in. Conversation was locked in. Nothing needed to be explained. We understood each other perfectly. We got it. And there was just a kinship. Immediately there was a kinship. And this is what we have. We have this kinship. So we could write, people could start writing about the kinship. They could start writing about the bonds of blood. They could start writing about the struggle and why we won't give up. Why should we give up? You know, there's all these things that we can start pulling from that are deep within us, that we can start really creating the new. And this is why I started, let's create the new. So I'm encouraging you all to just, if you're a musician, if you're a poet, an artist, a fashion designer, you make short films, you make short animation, you make anime, manga, traditional classical art, whether you paint Turners, or you are a capability Brown of a gardener. Like, let's just start making new and start celebrating and sharing it with each other. The more we can share these things, the more hope it's going to give us, and it will begin to exert our cultural authority, because that's what we have. We have cultural authority. There's very few cultures in the world achieved the zenith that the English achieved. I'd argue High German. I'd argue High German did. I'd argue the Tang Chinese did. And I would argue maybe the French under Louis XIV did. But there are very few that have reached our cultural zenith. So let's just celebrate it. If you want to find me on Twitter, which is at David of English, please go ahead. I'll happily share stuff as it comes through. As long as it's not overly profane, or calling for violence and things like that, or it's not overly degenerate, then yeah, I'll happily share it. And let's just get into this thing where we're backing each other, where we're giving each other the wins, even if it's just encouragement. If any of you are like in young bands and you want a second opinion on a song or whatever, drop me a line. If I've got time, I'll happily do that. And yeah, and look, I'll do a short series on these. I'll probably start in some fairly modern examples, just do little 10, 15-minute videos and go backwards across 1,000 years of things that I think are worth listening to, because I think they contain the essence of some Englishness within music. And I think, and it's not that you're going to listen to a 12th century plain song, monastic celebration of summer, and all of a sudden that's what you're going to get into. But it will impart something upon you that will help you understand the psyche of the English in the arts a bit more. So yes, if you like this, please like and subscribe. And if anybody wants to support me doing this, then I have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. That'd be much appreciated. I think, like anybody who's normal, and I'm just a normal, regular guy trying to make videos in my spare time, and Starmer's Britain's bloody tough. So yeah, if you can support me, that would be absolutely wonderful. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Citizens of the realm, crack on.